This is the Power Producers Podcast, where we are refining and redefining the sales game.
Rule number one is you have to believe in yourself. You're the only one who doesn't think you belong in this appointment. The prospect has already validated your existence by scheduling time with you. Get it through your head you belong here, go in there, crush it, and close the deal.
A place where sales professionals can come to learn from other sales professionals and thought leaders that have mastered their craft.
The difference between a good salesperson and a best-in-class salesperson is only 2 minutes. By spending an extra 2 minutes on what you might think is a mundane task in the sales game, you separate yourselves from the pack, you grow your book of business, you close more deals, and you retain your accounts.
As well as their peers who are still striving for perfection to achieve their why.
I have a wife and 4 kids. Failure is not an option.
Real sales professionals, real stories, real results. Are you ready to feel the power?
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Power Producers Podcast, where we are refining and redefining the sales game. And today is monumental for us. It is the first time we are recording and producing in video. And in order to do that, we had to bring on somebody who is much younger and much more attractive than either of the two of our mugs, Mr. Richard Stein from Wellhouse Company in Jacksonville, Florida. What's going on, Richard?
Not much. I'm just glad that everybody else also has to look at Kyle's beard today.
Yeah. How many listeners are we going to lose over this? I feel like this is a dangerous play here.
You know what? I've never been accused of playing it safe, man. Never been accused of playing it safe.
It's like when you read a book and then you see the movie and it's just disappointing, right? It's like not how you pictured it in your head. Although I guess people see us on Facebook and stuff, so maybe that's a moot
they do.
point.
It's funny though, man. I was actually just having that exact same conversation last week about reading a book and the movie being the same, and the topic of the conversation was the John Grisham books in movies. I felt like of all of the movies that have come from books, those were probably some of the most accurate depictions of what the book.
I think I'm going to start showing my age on anecdote 1, by the way, because I'm not sure.
Yeah, so like The Firm and The Pelican Brief.
Oh, yeah.
Rainmaker. Yeah, all of those I felt like I read all those books. And actually, I never read fiction, so it's probably been 20 years ago that I read them. But it's they follow pretty closely. And it's weird because you ever have that feel where you read something, like you're reading a book and you're imagining what the characters look like in your head and you're creating your own version of it? I think that's where like the big dynamic of the disconnect comes from, is we create this own stuff in our head. And then when we see what Hollywood thinks people look like or talk like or any of that, it's so far removed from what we thought that we can't get past that.
That's what I'm saying.
I thought The Firm was pretty close.
Yeah, and I think too, like it's iceberg theory, where they're throwing everything else you need in the book, and like the movie's a little bit. Well, you can't do as much with the medium, right? And so you can't take it literally. You kind of have to take a little bit more, kind of liberties with it, I guess.
Yeah, it's funny too because I look at it. I look at it from the standpoint of how I produce content, right? And so when I do a blog, it's always a transcription of a video, because I start with the video and progress through my process. And it's amazing to me that I can have a video that goes for like 5 minutes, and when I'm done, it's like 400 words. Like, I can't believe that you can't get more meat out of a video than that. So,
which is tough when you're trying to write it, and getting 400 words is, it takes you forever, and then you just speak, just spits right out.
Yeah. So listen, Richard, the reason, one of the reasons we talked about this before we went on, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on was to talk a little bit about sort of your backstory and the story of your agency, knowing that your dad comes from, a pretty solid insurance background and his history, but you came out of investment banking. And I know your story. I'm not going to tell it for you, but why don't you just take a couple of minutes to sort of talk about where you've been and how you got to the agency and where you're at today?
Sure. And I'll start with just Senior's top level story so that it kind of can dovetail nicely once I get to me entering insurance. But he's been in the industry for 25 years. He was with a company called Palmer & Kay. They were a strong regional brokerage. he kind of stepped in after being in the construction industry and took over their Florida office. Well, he was actually just kind of coming on as a producer, and he knew the CEO of the company who kind of brought him in, and my dad kind of reached out after he had been there for a little bit and said, hey, things aren't working out. This guy really doesn't know what he's doing running the office. And all of a sudden, Senior was running the office. So he took what was a struggling agency just in Jacksonville, kind of had $1 million in revenue, was losing $1 million to $15 million in revenue over the state. So I think they had 3 offices, one in the Panhandle, one in Miami, and one in Jacksonville. He was there for 10 years, and about 10 years in, they brought in a guy from Marsh who was supposed to take them from Southeastern to national. And he opened a Chicago office, a New York office, et cetera. Senior didn't think that it was going to go well. This guy was the type of guy who would stand in the front of a picture because he was short and he wanted to look taller than everybody. There's actually a pretty interesting read called Scuttled, the story of Palmer and Kay, that details how shit went down. But Senior kind of exited right thereafter. And he was at Linear Upshaw, which is a Lakeland-based agency for a few years, and was supposed to help them grow from kind of a Lakeland-based agency to a regional agency. The founder was supposed to kind of take a step back himself, and they were going to open up some offices, and then he got kind of cautious because it was 2006, and he thought there was going to be a financial crisis. So they amicably parted ways, and he seems very prescient because obviously there was a huge financial crisis. But then Senior went to Fletcher & Stein, where he bought in with an old colleague of his, and they ran that for about 10 years before selling to Aquasure. So my background's in investment banking. I went to a small liberal arts school called University of the South. It's on top of a mountain. It's 1,600 kids. It's basically camp for 4 years.
Where is that?
It's in Suwanee, Tennessee, which is between Chattanooga and Nashville. So you get a lot of Birmingham people, you get a lot of Nashville people, a lot of Northeastern prep school kids whose siblings went to Harvard or Yale, and they got kicked out of school at some point. And so this was like their fallback school. I would say most people from like the South were, intelligent, all that. And the kids from up north were too, but it was a different style. And it was a real cool, combination of all different, folks. You would think it'd just be a bunch of rich white kids, but in my pledge class was a Rwandan boy soldier. I had a Nepalese, he's now like an astrophysicist who was in my fraternity as well. So it was a
There's a 100% chance I would never talk to that guy.
He was interesting, man. Prashant. But yeah, so Suwanee is not a target school, and investment banking is very much kind of a target school related. Sorry, turn off the email. They want to see that you come from a school that has a history of developing talent for investment banking, not too similar from the NFL, but ended up in a really great situation. I was working with my boss, Peter Gonzalez, who had just founded his firm, and I sat across the desk from him for 2 years and worked deals. And we had a little bit bigger of a West Coast presence, but it was really just me and him on the East Coast. And we did everything from a few $1 million deals to got to hang our hat on a $100 million deal in the mortgage industry, and that transaction came through on December 23rd one year, so that was a fun Christmas. But I worked directly with clients, helping them either raise capital or go through sales processes, and really got to know founders well through that, and wanted to work directly in a company and leading M&A efforts for somebody. So I ended up at a group that was in the physical therapy industry, supposed to be leading M&A efforts for them, reporting to CFO, really checked all the boxes that I wanted. And once I got there, I got put into an operating reporting role. So I got to use VLOOKUP a lot, and VLOOKUPs and VLOOKUPs and VLOOKUPs. So my Excel skills are, excellent, even better than they were in investment banking. But I didn't want to do operating reporting, and the company's culture really exposed itself. I mean, I don't want to go too much into it, but it wasn't a good place. And my dad was in the later stages of selling Fletcher Stein when I was around 6 months in, and I knew I could at least help him, dust off the investment banking skills and help him as he kind of closed out the deal and looked at next steps. And so we looked at either acquiring a small agency and growing. We looked at partnering with somebody either regionally or nationally to build up their Jacksonville or Florida presence, and ultimately decided to, found Wellhouse from scratch. I like to say Senior kind of duped me into both moving back to Jacksonville and getting an insurance. But I've really enjoyed it. At the base of it, I go on field trips for a living. And, we work in an industry that's not thought of very highly. And I, like the idea of kind of changing that, at least if it's just for the clients that work with me. And, he's always been very long-term focused. And so that's kind of tough when you're first getting out there, both as a new agent, but also a new agency. But it's been an interesting but very fun few years.
I think it's awesome what you just said about you go on field trips for a living. I couldn't have said it better myself. I've never really thought about it from that way. I tell people I get paid to make friends for a living, but we do, man. When things are normal, we're literally going on field trips and learning different industries and different companies. And I mean, I think that's one of the things that keeps me so engaged in this industry is the fact that it's never the same thing 2 days in a row or even 2 appointments in a row for that matter. Investment banking gives you a very unique skill set, and I know quite a few people who came from investment banking into commercial P&C production, and I think that the skill sets you get in terms of numbers and being able to look at financials and make recommendations on operations in addition to simply just going in and slinging insurance policies is a huge skill set advantage you have over your peer group. I'm interested if that's accurate in perception or, and if you've actually felt like that you've been prepared to a certain degree by that investment banking, or if you think I'm nuts.
No, I think there's some crossover. I mean, at the end of the day, in investment banking, you're selling a company's risk as an attractive investment risk. Especially doing M&A, so you're actually selling companies or helping them raise capital. In insurance, it's selling a risk as an appetizing risk to insure. So it's pretty similar. I think the difference is in investment banking, you're selling it to either a private equity group or an acquiring company, whereas in insurance, you're selling it to an underwriter.
Who's worse to deal with?
Depends on the situation, right? But I felt a lot of animosity towards underwriters right when I got in the industry, not me personally, but I just kind of picked that up from producers. But I found that if you kind of tell them the story and give them all the the little touch points and, hey, this is a really great company. Yeah, they've hit some claims over the past few years, but their name is, synonymous with excellence. We're looking at a security company and they've had really bad losses on both the auto and the work comp lately. But you look at their, little company name and it's outside of every major house in Jacksonville. And so pitching it that way I found to be particularly effective. And that's where I think there's the big crossover is, also kind of dusting off the liberal arts education, but telling the story that's beyond just, hey, here's the application.
Yeah, I think that the art of the narrative, as you're going to find out when you go through keeping commercial, is imperative. Like, that's an art that gets developed over time, but I have to have a narrative literally on every single submission that I turn in because everything that we work on,
got hair on it,
for the most part, has a story to it. But I learned very, very early in my career that having those underwriting relationships was the key. If you don't have the underwriting relationship, you're not going to be nearly as successful as you would be otherwise. And I mean, some of my best friends in this industry are on the underwriting side because they've taken a chance and helped me when I needed their help. And as a result, they were rewarded rewarded pretty handsomely by the types of accounts that we give to them. Because I tell everybody up front, if you're going to write this for me this year, maybe next year, if the mod's going to have one more bad year added to it, that's going to be the time you make the most money on this account. Yeah. So if you want to, manage your profitability and you're going to put some stock in the fact we're going to deliver on what I promised to do, this would be the time for you to do it because, number one, it's never going to be as high a revenue for you again. And number two, if you think you're going to pass this time and 3 years from now, I'm going to give you another look, you're out of luck. I'm going to reward the people who took a chance on us when we needed the chance to be taken. And, we're talking about workers' comp in Florida, so the pricing's always going to be the same. It really comes down to whether or not they can match a dividend or program structure that we're putting in place. And as long as they can do that, I'm not going to go back to them after the fact and say, sorry, anybody can be here for me when the account's crystal clean. I need the people that are going to handle it the way that we get it.
I've been really surprised, too, by how kind of hesitant people are to say no, particularly kind of underwriters. And I get the sense that when they tell, producers no, or, I guess like quasi agency owner like myself, no, they get a bad blown up response, which is not surprising having seen like how some producers in the industry interact with clients and underwriters. But I found, once I've gotten them used to telling me no is fine, just tell me why. Because one, I can use that to build out what to better target for you, what to better, bring you and not waste any time. But that's, I noticed at first, at least before I really knew anybody, that no was not something that was often ever told. It was just kind of like they let it die on the vine. And I just want to know one way or another and why.
Yeah, I mean, I think the why is important for you to know as the producer. It's important so that you can go back and explain it to the client too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, most of the time, the why is the one thing that's left out.
Yeah, and, I think the why on the claim side too. I've heard you describe this a little bit, but as I've gotten more adept at using ModMaster, and thinking about using VAs to insert some of that data, I can see value in, saving the time to do that. But if you take a company's loss runs and you put them into Excel and then upload them into ModMaster, the time that it took you to do those, put the losses in usable data is valuable because you now totally understand that client's claims. Like, we're working with a nonprofit and they deal with at-risk youth. And so they had their mod blow up over the past, 3 years. And it's a piece of new business for us. And we're trying to show kind of what our risk management approach could help them with. And in looking at their losses, what I realized is, yeah, they have claims that have to do with dealing with the youth. But all the major losses are like the housekeeper hurting her back and, charging $70,000 over the course of a year. And, that can obviously go into the underwriting package as you present it to an underwriter. Because that's helpful for them to know too. Like, yeah, this is a big risk dealing with kids, but this isn't actually this company's big issue. It's all these things on the edges that we think Wellhouse can help them with.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, man. I was in St. Louis last week, and part of the reason I was there was to help a buddy of mine who has an agency up there who has a large general contractor that is not getting the revenue that they need because they can't qualify for jobs. Their mod jumped up to a 1.11, and now nobody will hire them to do work because their experience mod is above a 1. And, they were sort of baffled as to what they could do. They didn't really realize there was anything they could do. And I said, well, what's the story that the numbers tell you? What do the loss runs say? And if you've done a mod master, is there one specific shock loss? And basically what happened is I spent the whole day with them last Wednesday just breaking down this one deal so that they could go back and appeal to the risk management department of the construction company that is trying to hire this GC, right? Yeah. And I said, look, number one, you don't ever try and rationalize with a compliance monitoring company because those people know zero about insurance. They're probably all driving around 10, 20, 10, right? and have no clue how insurance works. So don't even waste your breath. I used to let my heart rate get through the roof because I was trying to explain to somebody who works at one of those monitoring companies why having an umbrella over top of auto increases the auto to the limits that they want it to have, and that nobody is going to sell them a $3 million combined single limit on auto, right? But I mean, in their defense, that they're not supposed to know it. They're supposed to know whether or not the box is checked.
Yeah, exactly.
And if the box isn't checked, they're going to kick it back to you. The only way you can get that fixed, and I'm saying this so that there are people out there that are moving into middle market and are new to it, they don't realize that you can't have that conversation. They're just going to get irritated because they're not getting anywhere when all they have to do is go around and find out, okay, who's the risk management people at the actual place that has contracted with these compliance people. So that was number one. Number two was as we look through the loss runs and the mods, the historical mods on this account had been 0.85 to 0.95 literally for its existence. And now it's at a 1.11. So what's the blip in the radar? Well, you go through and you look, they had one guy that smashed his hand. They had another person that I want to say twisted his ankle. He did something that you would expect in construction, but neither one of them a major claim. The major claim they had was a cleaning lady. And the cleaning lady had no business getting injured because
ladies these days.
So she didn't follow directions, right? These guys, and she was cleaning the actual company's building. It's not like she was going around cleaning up construction sites, but apparently they had some level of roof damage or something, and so rain had gotten into the upper floor, and they had not fixed it yet, so it was blocked off. They told her, "Do not go upstairs. We can't promise you're not going to get hurt. If you do, just stay out of there." Well, she didn't listen, and she went upstairs, and when she did, she stepped on the floor and fell through the ceiling of the floor below her and ended up with a fractured wrist. So my argument was, number one, I don't even know that I would have paid the claim. I would have probably fought getting it paid because she was explicitly told not to do that, and she defied company policy to do it. Mm-hmm. But insurance pays stupid just as much as it pays legitimate, so that gets thrown out the window. But we decided a couple things. Number one, so I had my first arguing point. You're worried about us operating safely on a job site for you. This one isolated incident that's really driving the mod has nothing to do with our performance on a construction site. It was a cleaning lady inside of our own building. And then number two, we went back and we looked, and this lady had 4 prior workers' comp claims.
Yeah.
So now you have to go back and say, look, it slipped through the cracks. We've now made it company policy that any employee, we're going to review the state database to see whether or not there are injuries there. And then the third one was that we ran the DART rate. Okay, so we looked at the days away from work and benchmarked that against other construction companies in Illinois, and we were best in class for that compared to the other construction. And then the final argument that I had them make was, at the very bottom of the experience mod worksheet, there's a disclaimer that very clearly says the mod is only to be used for insurance rating and price setting, never to be used for job qualification or anything else. Yet all of these companies are out there doing it. Mm-hmm. And the argument was, if NCCI is telling you their data is not good enough for you to make job qualification decisions off of, why are you doing it? So that was the case. We put everything together, wrapped it up with a nice, neat ribbon on it, and it was presented to the risk management department of the company, and we ended up getting them cleared to go out. They lost almost $20 million this year because nobody knew how to get around the mod issue. Mm-hmm. And we're actually going to do an episode of Shop Talk on this, but I think there's a lot of times where as agents, we look at stuff like that and we just say, oh man, that sucks. Let's hope the mod gets better next year.
Yeah, that's
instead of going out and fighting for your client, man. We can help our clients make money with a simple little bit of extra effort and an educated conversation in a case where you can prove this is an outlier. We should be doing that every single time, and I don't think agents by and large do it because it requires extra effort.
Well, and two is it's a lot of people you guys talk about all the time, like say, well, comp is comp, and comp is most certainly not comp. It is the thing that you can design the most around. The company has the most control around. You look at I think what Mike McDonough does with the nurse triage we started implementing. That makes a big impact. You look at just looking at the claims. Again, going back to Excel, putting the claims on Excel, showing how many times when the report date was, when the claim date was. You'll see a lot of Monday morning report dates. You'll start to identify trends. And two is deductibles. I'm talking with probably a $50 million manufacturing business. They've had some losses in their office staff, people slipping and falling. They can't afford that because they work on some government jobs and need below 1.0. And they're paying, the insurance company's paying $1 on the comp. And most people don't know there's a deductible in comp, but you can put it in there. And I know there's, only so much gets deducted for Florida, but still that little $2,500 that you can deduct can some of these companies make, if you're talking spending $200,000, $300,000 on work comp, it's probably saving you 0.1 or 0.2 on your mod.
Yeah, it's crazy that more people, that's one of my number one tricks, man, is to go in and look at some of these larger accounts and put them on that $2,500 deductible due to the net reporting in Florida. That's a no-brainer and a very easy way to fix some of the frequency issues going forward. The other thing is when the company's on the hook for that money, they're going to put a little more emphasis, and your client, they're going to put a little more emphasis emphasis on safety and risk management to make sure they're not
skin in the game.
Yeah, they should want skin in the game. I think the type of clients that you target, the type of clients that I target, the type of clients that most people want, if you explain it to them and show them the math of why they want skin in the game, in addition to the fact that they should just want skin in the game because any losses can be detrimental to their business, it's going to resonate. And I think that's the cool thing about the mod is that it's a report card, it's a snapshot, but it's controllable. And so you can plug it into Magic or ModMaster or whatever. And the biggest thing that I do is I just take the dollar amount of a claim and kind of use that to deduce, at least on the primary layer, what any claim would cost somebody and show them, all right, here's how this claim was handled. This is what we would do. I think this is what the impact would be. And people are just blown away by that. It's not something they've not just seen, like it's never even been thought of, because you see a lot of like brokers just, hey, here's the ModMaster. Here's what it would look like if you removed all the indemnity, or here's what it looked like if you had no claims. Like that's not helpful. Are they going to help you do that? Have they explained what work, return to work is, or have they, actually?
Well, they don't know, Richard. That's the problem. They don't even know how to explain a ModMaster or a Magic report or any of that. They're going to throw it out there. They probably paid an account manager or a CSR to do it. I mean, look, the number one thing that I've heard come out of your mouth over the course of the last 10 minutes is you validated exactly what I preach. You need to manually handle the data so that you can recognize the trends. I mean, if all you did was scan a mod worksheet into Magic or ModMaster or any of these other programs and looked at it, you're not going to have as much of an understanding. I mean, you might because you're numbers oriented, but for me, I gain more from that process of putting that stuff into a spreadsheet or putting it into ModMaster or Magic directly than what
it's basically just telling people that they suck, but not giving them the ways to fix it.
Yeah, I will say doing it. There's the easy way of just putting it the top level data and not plugging it in. You can at least I'd see, oh, here's 3 claims where we might be able to make a huge impact if you're just trying to do quick and dirty. But yeah, I mean, you're always going to benefit from seeing it.
Yeah, most of the time, quick and dirty is not an option in the middle market because you're dealing with 15 pages of loss runs in some cases, depending on what kind of an account it is. But I mean, that's a big difference, and it goes back to this goes back to what I've said all along. People who go and buy some of these mod softwares listen to how the actual software company trains them on how to use their product. The problem is you have a software salesman teaching you how to use an experience mod product. And in their mind, oh yeah, this quick mod is awesome, or scanning this in and then you don't have to enter anything. You can just manipulate it once it's there. All of that sounds efficient if you're a software salesman. That's one of the reasons why I like Magic. While Scott has built that program to where you can do the scan in, you can also do the manual stuff and, the questions. And one of my favorite features that they have is the ability to toggle individual claims on and off.
Because everything we're talking about is control and controlling those claims. So unless you can show a way of doing that,
it's a much better conversation when I'm sitting there. I mean, even let's just take it back a step. Look at it from sales posturing standpoint only, not even technical knowledge or anything else. If I have a product like Magic where I'm sitting at the table and I can just click a button and instantly the mod is recalculated in real time so that the client or prospect rather is watching that happen, I think that's a far more impactful presentation than what I'm used to doing, where I print out one report, then I go back and delete a claim out, print out a second report. Yeah. It's not more efficient that way. I can, in real time, sit in front of a prospect, turn claims on and off, talk about the different impacts of all of that. I think that that's a huge advantage. But I mean, again,
and I think too, if it's easy and anybody can do it, then it's not going to really be a great wedge. I mean, if putting a ModMaster in front of somebody was super impactful and it spelled out what exactly they needed to do, then that becomes table stakes, right? I mean, then everybody's doing that and you're looking for a different way to differentiate. And so I don't mind that it's not so easy to do some of this stuff, because then you got to go find something else. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that's ultimately what you're trying to do, is show your client that you're different. I think the biggest thing that I've gained from, working with you, David, is it's all of my dad's long-term clients know what the total cost of risk is. They know what risk management does. we did not do a good job of, in front of new prospects, showing them what that meant. What does it mean to work with Wellhouse? We were, preaching the good story, but at the end of the day, we were doing a quoting process and hoping that we won, or maybe, doing a quoting process so they could get a feel of working with us and then putting a AOR in front of them or something along those lines. Because a lot of times the risk is well placed. I mean, Brown & Brown is good at placing risk. They've got a whole team that does that, right? They don't do anything else. And,
because they go to 57 markets every year at renewal.
Exactly. And so what can you actually do? If you want to be an insurance sales guy, be an insurance sales guy. But if you want to be a risk manager and work with companies for the long term, what is your specific background kind of inform you to be able to do? Or what can you learn to be able to help companies out? Because I think everybody's looking for additional help beyond just, hey, here's the policy, call me if you have a claim, and we'll talk to you in renewal.
Yeah, I agree. Kyle, what do you have to add? You've been awfully quiet.
Well, I mean, there's multiple reasons for that today, but I would say I agree with you. With wanting to differentiate yourself and be able to set yourself apart. I mean, we talk about the insurance agency or the insurance industry being average, right? And that's what the average person would want to do. They just want to show up with something that's easy and not really invest any time into that. But I think the second that you do, and people realize that you took some time, went over all of their data and scraped it and actually understand their numbers, I mean, that sets you apart immediately. At the point of sale, you're going to have a leg up, on everybody there. So that's one of the things, the toggle on and off, David, that you brought up. When I watched the Magic demo, I thought that was the one thing that stood out to me. I was like, man, that's pretty cool. Cause that's a game changer right there, where you said you can just flick it on and off right in front of a prospect. That's huge.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, it's always been one of my strategies to go in with the mod as it is. And then here's what your mod could have been if you were working with us regarding how we approach return to work and indemnity and all of that stuff. So it's always impactful when you show that to a client. But now I don't have to go back and go through that extra step, print that extra paper and all of that. And, with COVID being the way that it is, we're doing Zoom meetings anyhow at this point. So
yeah, I do think, you brought up the 10-year history too, that you looked at for this St. Louis client, but underwriters are looking at that. And I've only ever had one tell me that they're doing that, but it costs just as much for you to pull 3 years of mod data as it costs to pull 15 years of mod data. So that's something I do a lot, is when I'm working with a high mod company, is I want to be armed with what the underwriter is going to find out anyway, right? And so let's look up and see whether this, recent spikes a trend. Oftentimes what you see is they kind of go like this. It gets important because it goes up, and then people lose focus because it goes down, and then it shoots back up again. And what I think you can preach and what I can preach is we're going to keep it low and steady, and you're going to have claims. But what can we do around the edges to help you, obviously prevent those claims, but even, for the actual business, how can we insulate you from those claims?
Yeah. And how can we make sure that when that claim happens, that A, your employee is taken care of the way that they need to be taken care of, and B, that we can handle the claim in such a way that we get them back to work and reduce the overall exposure from a financial standpoint to the size of the claim. The fact is, you want to be armed with what the underwriter is looking at, because as you create your narrative and your pitch to the underwriter to write the account, the more of those things you can show them that you have already checked gives you exponential credibility as a producer, because they're not getting this from producers. They're not getting this from people who are marketing people inside of agencies whose only job it is to go out and explain the risk and give the narrative. That position, by the way, and I'm sorry if there are people who are in that position that listen to the podcast. I'm sure you do an awesome job for your agency, but that position will never exist at Florida Risk. It doesn't make any sense. The reason why
you should know your deal as a producer.
Well, yeah, I was going to say the reason why is that marketing person never goes out and visits the client, or if they do, it's on an annual meeting to get exposure data. But they've not been in the trenches. They've not toured the production floor. They've not seen the building. They've not been on the roof to inspect the air conditioning units and all that other stuff. So, the producer has. And what I found is that when I was in an agency where they had that position and that person was sort of like the quarterback for going out and getting quotes and everything, I was getting calls from the underwriter all the time anyhow, because they want the information directly from me. So as an agency principal, I'm thinking I can pay $60,000 or $70,000 to have somebody do this, or I could go out and hire another rock solid account manager and let the producers handle this. They should be anyhow. And if I've got a producer that's bringing in an account that's $40,000 or $50,000 in revenue, they're going to want to be as deep into that account as they can anyhow, because they know what they're going to earn off of it.
They can walk through the lime slurry.
Yeah, the lime slurry.
But some of them don't. I mean, I went to this, it was probably $30 or $40 million scrapyard. And
there's a fun class of business to write in Florida.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm there, so first of all, I had to come back because the first time I wore what I thought were like some crappy boots I could get damaged. He's like, those are cute. Those aren't steel-toed shoes. I need you to come back. So I talked to the GM and the CEO for an hour, and then I came back and met with just the GM. And we're talking with the safety manager at first, and it wasn't like related to our meeting at all. It's just the safety manager happened to walk past. And, the GM goes, all right, well, me and Richard here, we're going to go ruin those nice new boots of his. So we'll see you later. And I walked around with him for 2 hours. It was 95 degrees on a scrapyard. So we're both just pouring sweat. And he said he'd never had an insurance guy that walked around with him, which is, to me, is like, there's a 4-story crane behind me. Like, how do I possibly know anything about this business unless I stand under it and can tell an underwriter that I have done that? There's a guy with a blowtorch that just cut a semi-sized tank in half, just him. And then one of the little cranes would come over and push it over. I mean, it was cool. I mean, I don't know why you would get in this industry and not want to do that, but apparently there are people who do that. And I think, that's all little teeny tiny bits of information that you can gather, and I think help, them design their risk management strategies as well, because they're going to know their business way more than you can. And then sometimes they're going to know their insurance on their business way more than you can. But where can you actually provide value other than just, slapping on some clothes?
Well, I can tell you, man, I have actually gone to work for prospects before. So I can think of at least a half a dozen times where I really, really, really wanted an account, and I've gone out, put my work clothes on, and gotten down and dirty. There was one early in my career that was a pool deck company. All they did was concrete work around pools. I went out for a solid 3 days and did forming and deck pouring with them and finishing the decks. And guess what? You're talking to all the employees when that happens. They don't know you're the insurance guy. I never told them I was the insurance guy. I'm getting all the dirty information that I wasn't going to get from ownership just because I was on the job sites with people telling me, oh yeah, he won't let us file a workers' comp claim. He told us he'd fire us if we fire a comp claim. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. No, thanks for letting me know. And I mean, but, there's a lot to be said for smoking the cigarette on the loading dock with the guy in receiving. He's going to tell you everything that you need to know about that operation. And I mean, that's one thing, that I feel like I've done a pretty good job at over the course of my career, is just getting as much information I can by befriending the frontline employees. And, it takes a while to do that. But, once they realize that they can communicate with me and I'm not going to throw them under the bus, then they're going to give me more and more and more. And I mean, I've got an account right now over in Orlando that I write that's got a few hundred employees. And when I pull up, it's like high fives. It's like the mayor's coming through. I need to get a convertible and a driver so I can sit like the prom queen in the parade and just wave to everybody as I come in, because that's what it feels like. But what's happened is they realize that they can communicate with me, and I'm going to be able to push to have the change that needs to be driven. And then they see that it actually gets done in their working environment is better. And they view me as a hero to them at that point. And I mean, that's a big deal if you're working in unsafe conditions and you've talked to leadership multiple times and you're not getting anywhere. So now I get as much information as you could possibly imagine. Some of it I don't want to hear.
Well, plus you tried to track down like an active shooter on that one, if I remember correctly, right?
We did actually do that. Yes, we had. There was an issue. I was over at this client's place, and I was sitting in the HR manager's office, and we saw a guy run by the window. And based on how this place is set up, it's guarded. You can't get in and out. unless you go through the guardhouse. And probably 2 minutes later, we get a call from the front that says, hey, go ahead and lock the door to your office and stay there because we've got an issue. Well, here's the deal, man. As it turned out, there had been a ring of jewelry store robberies, and all of the people that were stealing from the jewelry store were holed up in this resort. And
awesome.
that was their base of operations. And so I'm like, let me figure out what's going on here. So the security guy comes and he picks me up on a golf cart, and I'm strapped all the time. I don't go anywhere that I'm not carrying. So I jump in the golf cart with him, and we were going to find this cat. And
you grab your badge too?
I had zero badge, but we never found him, and they ended up. It was a pretty freaky deal, man, because there were a couple of helicopters flying overhead. I think I called somebody in the office. It might have been you, Kyle. I called somebody and I think I hear helicopters. I'm like, yeah, they're looking for this dude too. I mean, I was literally in the golf cart with the security guy with my pistol on my.
You texted me like. I think I had reached out, I asked a question about something, and you were like, "Oh, I'm trying to deal with this active shooter right now over at." I'm like, "Wait, what?" And then I think you called me shortly after that. I'm like, "There's the helicopters flying around. Like, what are you doing right now?"
Yes, Richard. I like to get really ingrained in my accounts. I bring value that a lot of people aren't willing to bring.
Well, that's it's tough to repeat that one too.
It is, yeah. That's a once in a lifetime for me. I'll never do that again.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, but I mean, look, Kyle's seen it. He's been on enough visits where, just if you're a producer and listening to this, if all you do is say, hey, you mind if we take a quick spin around so that I can get a tour before I leave?
Yeah.
You've already separated yourself from your competition.
None of their other insurance agents have ever done that.
Then the second
they really
piece
just want to show off everything anyway. Most
business owners are like proud of their business and want to talk. They like enjoy talking about it. So if you're doing something like that and showing that you have any type of interest in what they've got going on, like they're going to love that and respect that.
And it is different because everybody else is trying to like pop in there, do a presentation, wear a nice suit or whatever, or take them to lunch. And there's nothing wrong with either of those things. But I get a constant amount of surprise for asking, well, I just want to check out your operations. Like, I just want to see what the floor looks like. And
you could be like going into a manufacturing concern and realize that there's a ton of computer equipment that's bolted onto some of the manufacturing stuff. Is that covered under EDP? Is it covered under business personal property? What's going to happen to mechanical breakdown if you have an issue? All of these things, and until you actually touch and feel this stuff, the answer is it depends on what the coverage form says, but you form your questions as a producer to make sure that you're insuring things the right way. I always like to do this. I like to ask if we can take the tour, and then I want to make 2 to 3 verbal observations. Hey, looks like this guy's doing this over here.
Yeah.
Why did you guys decide to do it that way? Or, number one, hey, that electrical panel's open. You need to make sure you close that. It's not supposed to stay open. Just engage, even if it's surface level stuff. I'm not telling people how to conduct a thorough loss control visit on this podcast. We're telling you how to go out and produce middle market accounts. If you're the producer and you can just have 2 or 3 go-tos that you're looking for every time and maybe a couple of backups in case that doesn't work, you're done. You have just separated yourself from your competition by asking to tour and look at their operations, but then just slamming the door on anybody else coming in when you actually engage as part of that process. It's really that simple. It doesn't matter if you know anything about insurance or not. They don't even care if you know insurance.
It's layering your process onto what they're already doing right, too. Like working with like a 60 location franchise restaurant group. So I pulled their mod and I thought it said a 1.3. Turns out it's a 0.6. So we still got a meeting.
How did you mix that up?
I pulled up a retirement community in Oregon instead of a chain restaurant group in New York. But they still took a meeting because their agent had just been bought. And he described how they did have a mod problem and how they got it down. And then I described our process. And I used every single point where our process lined up with theirs and said, and it's kind of like you're doing with here. And it's kind of like you're doing with here. And I'm not sure whether I realized I was doing this or not, but I was basically telling him you're doing all this stuff. You can pay the same amount and have me do it, and you don't have to worry about it anymore. And that, really resonated with him. And, like, he's got an agent right now who isn't doing any of this stuff. And we can layer in, whether it's nurse triage or, even just like handling a claim, in a thoughtful way where you're not just letting it kind of like be up to the under. I mean, obviously claims is handled by the carrier, but following up persistently to make sure things get closed out. Even deductibles in this case were something that they had not thought of until they started having problems, and their agent had brought it, but it was retroactive. And I guess trying to show them that you can be, clients, that you can be proactive where everybody else in the industry is typically retroactive. And especially too, because people have a hard time conceptualizing how insurance is going to respond unless they've seen it respond in a, particular way. And so can you find areas that they've had problems with where what you typically do for your clients would align as a solution?
Yeah, I agree, man. And I think the other thing too is that a lot of people don't bother shopping until they've had some heartburn and had a problem. Yeah. So, we by and large are selling on fear almost every day. I mean, that's the way the old guard does it. It's here's what could happen. Here's what you're opening yourself up to and all of that. Whether that works or not remains to be seen and could probably be debated, but I don't like selling on an emotion. I'd like to sell on fact. I'd like to sell on data and what the numbers say. And granted, if you're effective in using that, you're going to create an emotional interaction that it's going to lead to a decision. But just going in and saying, oh man, that building's not covered. You realize you could lose $400,000. I've never really seen that be as effective, because usually as the incumbent, you have some level of latitude. If an account's been with you for a reasonable amount of time, I don't know what the psychological thought process is, but they protect that relationship because
they've made that decision.
Yeah.
And so that decision being a bad one is a reflection on them a lot of times. So you can't just go in there.
True.
Not that it's probably the right thing to do anyway, but trash the current agent because they decided to go with the current agent.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, and again, this goes back to the episode that just dropped on Friday on your prospect self-perception, right? That's like a huge gap, because we could go in and think things are horrible, and you go in with guns blazing to sell on all of the things that are wrong, only to realize you just irritated your prospect because they don't think anything's wrong.
Yeah.
So part of what I do, in my process is I make sure I know what their own perception is based on the exercises that I conduct before I present what I think their current situation is. Because the last thing I want to do is go in and say, well, you need to do this and you need to do this and you need to do this, and rate them as a 3.5 out of 10 on average, only to find out they think they're a 7 out of 10. That's a pretty big gap. I need to understand where they think they are before I present my findings, because if I have to soften that blow a little bit, or maybe leave a couple of things out so that I'm not just piling on to the point where it's ridiculous, then I have to do that, and then I'll address it later on into the relationship. I'm going to focus on the low-hanging fruit first, but sometimes there's not enough time to focus on low-hanging fruit and all of the other things you have to worry about.
I don't know whether you've ever really done this, but Senior has always brought along account executives, and we're fortunate to have a really great team, kind of our founding team. But I've noticed, too, that a lot of times people's main complaint about their agent is the service. And I don't hear about a lot of people bringing a service rep on the side.
Welcome to Keeping Commercial level lesson 7.
Yeah, but like even on the front end of a process, because
it's called Take Your Account Managers to Meetings with You. And that's the thing, man, is I was developing, and I'm telling you this as a member of Killing Commercial, there was a time when I went through and put all of this content together and was videotaping, and I got everything done, and we've uploaded it to Vimeo and are working on a couple just small minor tweaks before Lefevre can get it on the website in terms of how the layout works. But as I did it, I'm like, you know what, son of a gun, man, these people are going to get as much or more out of Keeping Commercial for the sales process as they did Killing. Because once you understand what happens in the end game and how things happen going forward, now you have another new process in your agency that you can represent to your client, And as you put that stuff in, you can get feedback from existing clients in the form of recommendation letters that you can carry with you when you go on sales calls. But I have always been a huge proponent of taking account managers on appointments with you, new business or otherwise. Number one, they're more detailed than I am. If I was really, really detailed, I would probably just be an account manager, not a producer. But I'm not. I can go out and sell the deal, but when it comes to making sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, I'm very, very transparent about the fact I have to have handlers. I'll close deals with the best of them, but if you need me to do paperwork and get signatures and have tasks for follow-up and all of that, I'm going to fail miserably. That's just not what I do. I can't. I mean, I probably could, but then my life would suck, and I wouldn't be able to go out and produce anymore because I'm constantly having to do all of that stuff.
Think about how much. Go ahead.
Yeah, and the other thing is I miss things, right? So if I've got an account manager there, a lot of times they're so used to diarying accounts that gets a little scary.
What are they doing?
In their diary, right? The diary, the notes, the suspenses that they put in the AMS. Not where you were going.
My head did not go to the
diary.
How many times my account executives do say diary? Like it's.
Yeah. What do you?
My diary came up.
Yeah, and so I mean. But they're used to that, so they're good at taking notes and capturing things. And so even if you have that person there just to take notes and remind you of the discussion, there may be things I forget when I leave. But the other thing is they're the ones that have handled the account the entire year. Maybe they know of a circumstance that I discussed with them at surface level, but they had a really in-depth conversation. I'm a big fan of putting a name with a face and getting these people in front of who's going to be taking care of them.
Well, that's what I was going to say. How much more impactful that is to get them in person and show them who they're going to be dealing with the majority of the time from all their servicing stuff. Getting certs and like
the team
if they know this person, then what's that?
The team you've met is the team you're getting.
Right.
That's the constant complaint is that, well, I met with a producer and then I got passed off to a service person and then there's another service person and I don't even know who to email anymore.
Right.
That's the, whether it's a strong local independent agency or, a national agency, that's typically the complaint that we get.
I mean, if they've been able to build a little bit of rapport with them on the front end, like if this is a new client, right, and then they're not going to have to track them down and hassle them for signatures. Like you're just more apt to get people the things that they need, if you've met them in person versus just copy them on an email. Hey, this is so and so. They'll handle all your certificates and this, that, and the other. I think it's a much more impactful play there.
And something I'll do too is I'll take not an initial prospect, but once we've been talking to a prospect and we ultimately need to do the application, like either bring lunch to their place or take them to lunch, bring in an account executive and do the application with them. Because you'll get a lot about the business that you wouldn't, I don't think, get otherwise if you just send them off. It's probably not the most efficient thing to do, but you're getting a touch point. You're building rapport between some of their team and your team. And, it's not shuffling back paperwork 5,000 times to make sure, question A, box C was ticked or not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree completely. It's it's just extra little things like that you can do along the way that set yourself up. I make it a point to always notice as much as I can, and I'll typically bring it up in conversation when I'm talking to somebody. But I look back. We had a producer that's not with us anymore, and there's a lot of reasons why. But we went into an account and we were talking. We walked in. And we were getting the stink eye from the second we got there. Like I had to turn sideways to walk through the gate because it was closed that much. And, they obviously weren't wanting solicitors in there, but it was still open enough for us to get in. So we went in, and as we're walking up, the lady that I knew we were supposed to talk to is just staring a hole through my chest. And so very quickly disarmed her, smiled, introduced ourselves. And she said, "Excuse me for just a second. I have something I have to deal with." And the guy who delivers the rugs for that company was there. And so he came in and he rolled the rug out, and the lady looked at the lady at the other computer and said, "Didn't your dad say he wanted a different kind of rug this time?" And I'm like, ding, 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 owner's daughter at the computer to the right. So she's like, "Yeah, he did. He said he wanted this kind." And the guy from the rug delivery company says, well, it's going to cost you like an extra $6 or $7 a month for that. I'll see if I can do anything about it. I'll call back to the office and find out. And the lady's like, okay, well, regardless, that's what needs to happen. We need that kind of rug here because that's what he wants. And so the guy leaves, and the lady comes back. She says, I'm sorry. I said, no, ma'am, actually, I owe you an apology. I can't believe you just had to witness such horrible salesmanship. I mean, what's the value of your contract over the course of a year? And this clown is going to have to call back to corporate for $6 to $7 approval on a single rug. That's coming out of my check, if nothing else. But the answer is, yes, ma'am, I'll go get the other kind off the truck right now and make sure it's out. And I'll figure out how to handle the other stuff on the back end. But as we're sitting there, conversation switches and goes to Girl Scout cookies. And the lady mentioned, I don't even remember how it happened, but she's like, I really want to try the new lemon Girl Scout cookies. I think they would be really good. And I'm like, interesting. I said, well, you know what? I know a guy who knows a guy. I can probably get you some lemon Girl Scout cookies next time we come by. And then the owner's daughter pipes up and says, don't be bringing me any Girl Scout cookies. If you're going to bring me anything, bring me Chick-fil-A. And I'm like, what's that Chick-fil-A order look like? And she said, number 1, supersized with sweet tea to drink. I'm like, I've had you pegged for 10 minutes now. I knew exactly what that order was. You just confirmed it. And so we stop, and she's like, you know what? I really like you guys. The owner's a little bit difficult to deal with. I'm going to soften the way for you, but I want you to keep following up. I'm not going to promise you that we'll get you in immediately, but stay in touch. I think this would be good for him to talk to you. So we go out to the car, and I asked the other guy, I'm like, so what do you do now? And he said, well, I'll put it for follow-up, and, I'll follow up with him here in a couple of weeks. I'm like, no, you're going to be here next week with 2 boxes of lemon Girl Scout cookies and a number 1 supersize with a sweet tea from Chick-fil-A, and you're going to bring it to him early enough that she has it for lunch without having to go out and get her own. I said, you have to execute on what we just learned. We know what they like now. Now we can do it. But, I mean, even with Girl Scout cookies, and I know that we're going in a weird direction here, but this is actually relatively valuable for cold call marketing drops. I went out and bought 100 boxes of Girl Scout cookies last year. Well, guess what? I also have a cooler with dry ice that I put in the back of my car that if I'm going to go out and somebody says Thin Mints is their game, I'm going to walk in and give them a box at room temperature and a box that's frozen because I have them in my car already frozen.
Do you want me to give you my address? I'd love for you to swing by.
Yeah, absolutely. But, I mean, think about it. How hard is it for me to do that? But what is the wow factor? Because we all know that 99% of the people who like Thin Mints want them in the freezer. I mean, I don't even know that there's another way.
So I don't know if I've eaten one at room temperature before.
I mean, they're not bad, but it's not frozen.
Inappropriate to do that.
Right.
Yeah, but how many people are actually going to take the time to walk in with a frozen box of Thin Mints or somebody on a marketing drop? They're not. You've instantly got their attention for the rest of whatever you have to say.
Yeah.
So I heard an anecdote. It's from the source, but Pure, the high-end insurer, had a client had a claim, pretty big claim, and Pure followed up and asked the guy, hey, we like to follow up with claims to see how we did. He's like, I mean, you did this right, and you did this right. And the guy's just, singing their praises. And, the guy who's intaking, like, that's great. I really appreciate that. But, is there anywhere where we can improve? And he's like, no, I mean, and continued just talking about how great they did. And he's like, sir, I can't let you get off the line unless you can tell me something where we can improve. And he goes, well, aside from, buying me a sandwich, I can't imagine anything you guys could do better. 2 days later, Pure sent the guy 2 Chick-fil-A sandwiches and 2 drinks. Cost them $20 less. Yeah. But this guy calls up and he's like, I'm going to tell all my friends. And turns out this guy's, an influential guy in Atlanta who's got, all of his friends have $5 to $20 million houses, and they wrote a bunch of business because of that. But it's the little teeny tiny things that matter. The little things aren't nothing; they're everything. But that's, it goes back to actions being culture, right? I mean, you can't train someone to do that. They have to be ready to do it. It has to be kind of in their culture, and I think it has to be in your company culture too. That we're not what we say we are. We are what we do.
So here's my question, man, because we've been going almost an hour now, and I want to be respectful of your time and wrap up on time. What's the biggest surprise or the biggest challenge you feel like you've had since you jumped into the insurance game?
everybody already has what you're trying to provide them to some extent. I mean, everybody has insurance unless it's a new business, right? And I've been surprised by you have a really good first or second meeting and how much follow-up you need to do to get people kind of moving. In investment banking, it was a defined process. It's a 9 to 15 month process, and it's a one-time event. They're raising capital or selling the business. This is something that they go through every single year. And I think they're predisposed to assume that you are just like every other insurance guy, right? So that's what's been, frustrating and most surprising is you feel like you have it all figured out. You feel like you've really connected with this guy, and he's gung ho about Wellhouse or Florida Risk or whoever, and it takes more time than that. My dad's really good at this. He'll kind of at the end of the process go, did we do what we said we were going to, or what did you ask us to do? And they'll say, I asked you to do this, and did we deliver what was asked on us? And it's yes. And then, okay, well, how does that affect your decision then? But it's way more reps than I expected. People's memories are a little bit shorter than I would have otherwise expected.
Yeah, your dad's doing it the right way, man. I think that, I don't think anybody really goes out and closes a ton of middle market accounts on the first meeting. I expect to close it on the second meeting every time, because the first meeting is fact-finding, getting actionable information, and the second meeting is going back and presenting our findings on that stuff. And to me, I want to set the table at the end of the first meeting and say, you're giving us all the information that we've asked for. We're going to come back and we're going to present our findings, and that's going to include solutions. And one of those solutions is that we're going to ask you to fire your existing representation and hire us. Are you going to have a problem doing that if our case is compelling enough? And, if they say, well, I've been with so-and-so for a long time, I'm probably going to say, you know what? It probably doesn't make sense for us to meet again because I'm not in the habit of doing this for practice. Yeah. If you're not willing to make a decision based on what our findings are, then you should probably just stay with the status quo that you have right now. But it's crazy to think that, but you have to plant that seed literally every meeting. And you open up the second meeting with the exact same thing. Hey, we've got a great case to discuss with you today. I feel like everything we have here is going to be very compelling. In fact, I'm going to ask you to hire me after we're done presenting. So I want you to listen to what we have to say with that filter, in your head while you're listening to me. And that's it. I think a lot of times, man, and I'm not saying this because of your comment per se. I'm saying this because it's what I've seen with producers time and time again. They don't ask for the order.
Yeah, no, that's
I learned really early on in my insurance career. If you want the order, ask for the order. It's really that simple, but it's not, because producers get scared. They clam up. They don't know how to go after it. And I'm at the point, and your dad's the same way, man. He's been in this longer than I have, but I'm going to ask for the order every single time. Maybe not in the first meeting, but I'm going to set the table to do it. But you can be 100% certain I'm asking for the order in the second meeting. And if they balk, I want to know why, because I've got a decision to make at that point. I'm either going to proceed and continue to romance them over a period of time to try and, win them over, or I'm going to cut bait and move on. I'm not going to sit here and play this game, where every couple of months we're meeting again, or every couple of weeks we're meeting again, and they're just, sucking all the information they possibly can out of my head for nothing. That's just not going to happen. So
yeah, I found I feel like I'm doing a lot of chasing to get all the information I need for that second meeting to be truly impactful. And I think I start a little bit slower than you. But even still, I feel like I'm doing a lot of chasing to get that information. And then what felt like a lot of time before a renewal ends up being kind of like crunch time. And I want to be able to show them something before asking for the order. And I think too, when asking for the order, it's not easy to ask for it, but it's a lot easier to ask for it when then you kind of walk away from it. It's like, well, this is how we work, but this one time I'll kind of just show you this process. And it's, standing true to kind of what you're going to say you're going to do, which is,
well, the other piece of feedback I would give you is you always need to tie a dollar amount to your time or your work product. So for me, and Kyle will tell you, he's heard this countless times. If I'm going to do a mod audit for somebody, I'm letting them know up front, this is typically something that we charge $2,500 to $3,000 for if we're doing this on a fee for service basis. because we believe we can help you and that ultimately you're going to come to the decision that you agree with us and you're going to want to hire us, I'm willing to take a gamble and comping you $2,500 to $3,000 worth of work for nothing, because I know that we can bring value to you, and I feel like you're going to see that. But I don't want them thinking that we just go in and give somebody a MOD analysis for free every single time. Whether we do or not is irrelevant. It's still our time and effort that goes into it, and they need to value that.
Right.
We did a podcast a couple weeks ago on value your time. Don't sell yourself short. Too many times as producers, we're so worried about getting the order, we do whatever they want us to do. We let them be in control.
Well, and keeping the relationship happy and not being almost afraid to get a no.
Yeah, and that's the problem, man. I mean, you have to value your time. Even as simple as when you're making the phone calls to try and get to talk to somebody from a telemarketing perspective. You know, we always say, hey, you know, I know you weren't expecting my call. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I know you weren't expecting my call, so I promise to be brief. That needs to be changed to, I know you weren't expecting my call, so I promise to be brief because, honestly, I've got another call in another minute and a half anyhow. So here's what I'm calling for. This is what I expect to get out of it. Does this make sense to you? You know, along those lines, or we go into the 2 no's and a yes and the things that we teach in Killing Commercial. But at the end of the day, man, you know, you have to acknowledge that you're worth something too, because I think that especially if you're in some of the harder industries to deal with, like, you know, some of your construction classes and things like that, you're just viewed as a vendor, period. You're no different than the guy that's selling them their steel toe boots or, you know, their Dickies work pants, or the Aramark guy that comes to – I mean, you're not viewed as a trusted advisor and a financial partner that's critical to their success. And part of that we have to blame our industry on. We got people that are going out there whoring themselves out to sell policies. They're not solving problems. They're not taking data sets and breaking it down into understandable terms to show somebody the trends in their company and all the things that we talk about. We're responsible for that, you know, and we can only change that as more and more people begin to realize that there's a lot better ways to go about what we do than just simply going out and quoting for business and writing policies.
Because the field that allows us to be so differentiated also means that everybody that we're starting a relationship with is kind of assuming that it's not going to be a quality relationship. And so while it's great that there's a lot of room to improve, compared to what they're expecting, you know, they're not expecting you to be what you are. And that's the biggest challenge. And that it's hard to get that across to a prospect because, one, everybody says they're great. Everybody says they have great service. Everybody says they can deliver on price or total cost of risk or whatever. But again, you know, like, what are your actions, and how do you? It can be tough to show how to show that process to people. I think that's what you've done really well, is be able to show on the front end. Here's what it's like to work with us, and then, you know, putting it on the line too. Which, here's what it's like to work with us, and if you want to, here's the paper you need to sign, because otherwise you ain't getting me for free.
Well, that and the fact that nothing that we're talking about is conceptual. It's factual, and it's based off of their own numbers. So it's not like they're going to come back and argue with me that this isn't accurate or this didn't happen. No, you earned that number. That's why I'm using it. You can't argue with me about your past performance because this is it. This is it in black and white right in front of you. And, by the way, it's a predictor of what your future is going to look like if you don't stop and fix it now.
Yeah.
Well, listen, man, we've been going long enough. We'll have you back on because we're going to follow you as you continue to build out Wellhouse. I know that, you know, I can speak for myself. I'm glad that I've gotten to know you, and I look forward to watching you guys continue to build that machine up there. I'm sure other people are going to want to reach out to you. And, you know, you still have some ties to investment banking, so there may be people on here who need an intro to somebody in that arena too. Tell them how to find you.
Yeah, the easiest way is probably to email me at RSJ, Richard Stein Jr. at Wellhouse Company. That's WELLHOUSE, company spelled out.com. I'm pretty quick on email. I've always got one of these.
Where'd the name come from? Speaking of which, where did Wellhouse come from?
It's my middle name. It's my dad's middle name. And then it's my grandmother's maiden name. She's actually a Tampa native. Wellhouse Company. We've got it looks kind of like this, an old press that they use to seal like paper packaging for fruit. So
interesting.
It has some goodwill in it.
Yeah, well, I mean,
it's 2 words that have positive connotations to them. So,
Absolutely. That I had no idea. So that's actually maybe a cooler story than I thought it was. That it was based on something real instead of some fictitious something or other that. On
some marketing things I've sent out, I've actually taken the original press and just done it kind of at where the letter closes. I've gotten some fairly good feedback from that too.
I think that would be cool, man. Sort of that like antique type vibe
or something like that.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Well, listen, man, I'm going to let you run. Thanks so much for spending time with us today. Appreciate it and look forward to watching your continued success. And can't wait till this bad boy drops in video for the very first time.
You're stuck with my mug, I guess.
All right, buddy. See ya.
See ya.
You've been listening to the Power Producers Podcast. You can follow Killing Commercial Insurance on Facebook and YouTube. And if you want to take your game to the next level, check out our book, The Extra 2 Minutes, and our website, killingcommercial.com.